Live from Denver's Cherry Creek neighborhood, you are watching the Kyle Malnati Show. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and I'm sitting here with Josh Mullins from Larimar. We're thankful for Stuart Title for providing us the space to record today. Josh, welcome to the show.
Thank you
for being with us.
Glad to be here.
So Josh is an acquisitions director with Larimar. Josh is a client of mine, and Larimar has acquired in the last couple of years here, just in Denver alone, they'll be buying their 10th building, which will total 315 units. And this year, Josh has purchased a 34 unit as well as a 12 unit building for my business partner Greg and I. And we're very thankful of that business, Josh, and we're going to be talking about multifamily today. Josh, what is your kind of purpose-driven statement of life? And I believe in leading an intentional lifestyle, so that's surrounded by the question why. Why real estate for you, and what got you started in the real estate business?
It kind of goes back to my senior year in high school. Worked after school my second part of the senior year for an insurance company, and the owner owned probably half the rentals in my small town. And every month he's coming in, collecting, people were paying his rent. And I would get to talk to him late in the evening and kind of see where his wealth really came from, and all the insurance business was great. I mean, he really made his wealth through real estate. I'm not in it necessarily for the money. I mean, money's great, but reality is I love real estate. I love looking at real estate. I love the relationships involved, closing dinners.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I do like to look at real estate and just like, all right, what can I do with this building? Like, there's a building. What's its location? Is it going to get better? Is it going to get worse? Is it staying the same? How can I increase the value of that building? Not only for my investors, but also for the tenants that want to live there. I mean, everyone needs a place to live. So we're providing a service, and hopefully a great service, we believe we are, to residents and tenants. And so I can truly say I love what I do.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most captivating parts of real estate. When you start to see it, whenever you become exposed to investment real estate in your life, seeing that wealth creation, and that should be a focus, because you look at it and say, okay, well, how am I going to retire? How am I going to pass along a legacy to my heirs? And rental real estate's a great way to do that. And then also the social impact of what you do, running clean, well-run apartment buildings, I think is a big responsibility in the market, and Larimar does a great job with that. So I think that it is important to kind of look at both of those things. Obviously, you're doing it so that there's wealth creation and income creation, because you have investors and you have partners that are putting a lot of risk in putting their money into a real estate investment. But then you've also got the tenants that you want to make sure are treated the right way as well. So there's always that balance between the two. What is Larimar's competitive advantage here in the marketplace, Josh? You've got we talked about in the prep that Larimar is a national company that's taking root in several different key markets. But what in Denver here, what do you believe Larimar's competitive advantage is?
Well, we are unique in this space, in that we are not a large, but a fairly large company that's institutional, but we're also very entrepreneurial. We have over 800 employees across the country. We manage 33,000 units. We have 6 senior partners that have been investing together for an average of over 10 years. So we have a lot of high-level executive experience that you just typically don't have for a group that's operating 1,000 units or 2,000 units. You just can't afford it. So that's a huge advantage for us. Our back office can help the field, and the field can focus on running the property, keeping the tenants happy, keeping the units clean.
So that allows everybody to play in their strengths, which I think is really important, to have a strengths-based organization. And then it also allows that knowledge base of having the experiences that you might have in San Francisco or in Chicago. How does that relate to Denver? And you kind of have this group think, or this mastermind that you're able to do by bouncing ideas off of each other and seeing what's working in one city versus another.
Absolutely.
And then obviously Denver's going to still be unique in itself, and there's going to be things that'll work here that maybe don't work in Chicago, just based on the size of the city and the way that the economy is going and all of that.
Definitely, every city's its own beast, but we do have our best practices, and anything that works in Chicago, we'll consider in Denver, and we'll give it a shot. If it works here, great. If it doesn't, doesn't, and vice versa.
So Josh, Larimar's fairly new to the Denver scene. I've only been experienced with Larimar since probably 2012, so about the last 3 years. What has Larimar learned just kind of coming into the market as a new entrant?
Actually, Larimar's been in Denver for almost 15 years. We have a headquarters in the tech center. We have over 80 employees who handle the back office for the 33,000 units that we own or manage. 10 years ago, we owned larger institutional deals, 300-400 units. 2 years ago, we moved into the small building space. We call it our urban neighborhood strategy, which is a strategy that we started in San Francisco in 2009, where we were extremely successful. We've rolled this strategy out in Chicago, LA, and then a little over 2 years ago, we rolled it out here in Denver. And the strategy focuses on buildings less than 75 units in urban neighborhoods, Cap Hill, Wash Park, Congress Park, Highlands, neighborhoods people want to live in, but either can't afford to buy a home and choose not to live in the suburbs.
Yeah, the exciting neighborhoods that Denver has to offer have really been being repurposed and not in such a way that they're going to change for the worse, but there's a lot of investors that have been investing and digging in deep to all of the neighborhoods that have been right around downtown. And Larimar's doing a great job of it. And it's interesting to know that even though acquisitions have only been done here for the last couple of years in the space that I operate in, you've had headquarters here for a long period of time. And it reminds me, my wife worked for Oppenheimer Funds. They have lots of different offices across the U.S., obviously in New York, near Wall Street, Boston, but Denver was the hub of their back office. Obviously salaries and wage of living or cost of living and wages and all of that are a lot less expensive in Denver than they would be in New York or in Chicago. And so I think there's value to that, and it's great to know that Larimar is committed to Denver long-term from an office standpoint. Our last guest was David Birch and Heidi Birch. They were here in July. And they asked a question for the next guest. They didn't know who it was going to be, but their question was, where do you see Denver in 10 years? And then forecasting even further in 20 years.
I'm a firm believer in Denver long term. I love Denver. I moved here 6 years ago. It took me a couple months to realize I'm never leaving. And I think everyone who moves here kind of comes to the same conclusion. 9 out of 10 people are transplants, it seems like, and they moved here whether on purpose or on accident, and this weather is amazing.
Yeah.
You have world-class skiing a few hours away. The restaurant scene continues to get better. We're starting to be recognized nationally for good restaurants opening up here in Denver. And then the music scene's incredible. I mean, any band that's touring in the U.S. has a stop off in Denver. And people are moving here. They're going to continue to move here. So I think in 10 years, values are going to be higher. In 20 years, values are going to be higher. And you're going to be glad long-term that you are in Denver.
Good. Well, I think a testament to what your response is absolutely true. You go to a Broncos game, there's just as many Bears fans as there are Broncos fans. And for sure, if you go to a Rockies game, there's just as many Cubs fans as there are Rockies fans. So, Denver is a transplant city, and that's part of, people like to get out of the Midwest, out of the cold, and come to sunnier Denver, Colorado. And that's been something that I think it has been a long driver. The skiing has been a long driver, but recently your point about great restaurants, the great neighborhood scene, and the fact that people are investing in creating amenities here that are things that are going to continue to attract a young, educated workforce, I think makes Denver a great place to invest for the long term. Absolutely. And when we were talking earlier during the prep for our show, you were mentioning, hey, if you look at something for 3 years or for 5 years, there's definitely going to be market fluctuations, and that market cycle is always going to happen. But if you're looking at things in the long term, generally things will be smoothed out, and real estate rights all of the wrongs. All the wrongs get righted in real estate over the long term. They really do. Now, what question would you like to ask for our next month's guest?
Where do you think the next Rhino is going to be?
The next emerging market, the next Highlands or the next Rhino. Where's Denver's next it market? Cool. Well, we'll ask that to the next guest. What question would you ask, or what question would you ask? What would you give as far as advice goes to an aspiring investor, someone who's never invested before, has saved and scrimped and has a couple $100,000, what advice would you give? Because you look at a lot of deals on a daily basis and you underwrite a lot of properties. What do you think an early investor needs to know?
I mean, know what you're buying, understand what you're buying, understand the risk, understand the capital, but also, you know, be careful with leverage. I mean, real estate is great because you're able to leverage so high. It's the highest leverage you're able to get outside of a futures contract.
Right.
But that leverage can work against you just as quickly as it works for you. In an up market, you're 90% leverage and everything's great, and you turn your 10% into 40%. But it can work against you very quickly too. So be very cautious of leverage. Use it to your advantage and understand where you are in the cycle. But most importantly, understand what you're buying and spend the time and money knowing your capital risk, because it's always going to be more than you think.
Yeah, well, and it's really interesting because you as an investor, you have the opportunity to try to be very, very calculated and very intelligent about what you do and you know, kind of dig into the numbers. But the reality is real estate's a very simple business if you make it simple. And the simple parts of the business are, don't go way over leveraged, understand your marketplace and do a lot of research before you buy, and invest and own long term, not speculate. As a lot of the people who watch our show know, I believe that leaders are readers. I believe that people that intentionally educate themselves outside of high school or college and continually read good nonfiction books are going to be the leaders of our country and leaders of business. So what book have you read in the past that you really think is a great read?
The most recent book was called Margin of Safety. It's by probably the most successful value investors you've never heard of, running one of the largest, most successful hedge funds you've never heard of, Baupost. Seth Klarman started Baupost, wrote a book in the early 90s, Margin of Safety, published 1,000 of them. You can only get them by paying thousands of dollars on Amazon and eBay.
It's rare.
Yeah, it's a rare book, but it's really focused on more of equities and bonds, and it goes back and talks about all the different cycles, the junk bonds of the 80s, and how every cycle kind of follows the same thing. There's always a sure bet, but at the end of the day, every sure bet usually is not a sure bet. It's just, but what I took away from that book primarily is the fact that there's speculators and there's investors. I realize most people are speculating.
Right.
An investor does their research, does their homework. They understand what they're buying. They don't pick up the Barron's and buy something because Barron's tells them to. They understand what they're buying, and that's probably the biggest thing. Understand what you're buying, and understand what you're investing. He was a student of Benjamin Graham, considered the father of value investing, who personally taught Warren Buffett, which is much more of a household name.
Right.
And so he's the value investor you haven't heard of, and it's a great book, and I highly recommend trying to borrow it from somebody.
Yeah,
unless you have a few grand laying around.
I like improving my library, but I'm not sure that I'm going to invest in that. But I mean, that type of message is absolutely appropriate. Mm-hmm. Understanding that you're not a speculative investor, you're investing for the long term. In doing that, you have to understand certain irrefutable laws of investing, and so that'll be a book that I definitely want to pick up. Just not sure I'll buy it. I think
I'll see if I can loan it to you.
Well, I always provide our guests with a gift, and like I said, I enjoy reading, and so I've gotten you the gift of the book called Start. It's by an author named John Acuff, and Start is all about how, decades ago, people used to start working for a big company in their 20s, and they'd work for their lifetime into their 60s. And it kind of debunks the myth that you have to do certain things in your 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. Your 20s is your learning phase. Your 30s is your editing phase. And all the way into your 60s, which becomes your guiding phase. So what this book is all about is you can start your road to mentoring someone right now. you can start doing a new business. You can start investing in real estate and learning from people by watching podcasts like this or asking investors what they're doing and really educating yourself and fast tracking yourself. It's a fascinating book. I love it. And it's all really about work that matters, doing things that really matter. And so hope you enjoy it. And I want to say thank you for everybody watching our podcast today. This show is where Multifamily Matters, and we are so happy that you joined in to tune in today. For Josh Mullins, this is Kyle Malnati. We'll see you around the neighborhood.